first of all, I want to focus on this idea that it seems like there was no plan for the Republicans to try to go at effectively the possibility that it could have been someone other than Biden. Was the plan really just to dangle the possibility that he should not be there, and that was the end of the consideration?
Well, you mentioned the dream turning into a nightmare. I think this was your right-wing uncle's fever dream playing out at every step of the way over the last month. Biden got up there and fell apart on the debate stage. They were going to come around and switch him out, but the expectation was always it was going to be somebody else. It was going to be Michelle Obama. It was going to be Gavin Newsom. It was going to be Gretchen Whitmer. I think Republicans are still struggling with the idea that Democrats not only have rallied around Kamala Harris, but they seem to be really excited about this. And in an environment where Republicans over recent years are mostly happy when Democrats are sad, I think there's a fundamentally disorienting experience to watch as the plan comes to fruition and wait, everybody's happy. It's like the Grinch stole Christmas and the Who's are singing around the Christmas tree. I think that's what's thrown them. There's a messaging vacuum right now. Into that space, you're having people coming out in front of the mics and saying really dumb things. I do think you're starting to see the real attacks start to percolate. David McCormick's messaging in Pennsylvania are some of the ads you're going to start to see, and I think that will be followed. But Speaker Johnson is right when saying Republicans are stepping on their own messaging, and actually it's the best favor that you could do for Kamala Harris is to insult her in personal terms because people don't think like that. They're being reintroduced to her. They're giving
the best they can do is to attack her personally? That's the
Democrats.
plan?
No, I'm saying...
But what's the message for Republicans to be able to suggest that, what is the issue?
You can't assume that people consume the same right-wing media that files her away in the way that you think they are as a Republican member. You have to be reintroducing them to her record. She was the 51st vote for the Biden spending that brought on inflation. She was the border czar at a time when the border's out of control. These are the sorts of message I think you're going to see them hit her on. Every position she took out of step with the mainstream in 2019 in the context of the 2020 primaries, that's what you're going to see over and over. But stay away from the personality stuff. That's only going to blow back for you in Republicans.
I mean, Speaker Johnson seems to agree with that philosophy of the policies, not the personality. But then again, tell a baby not to cry. And these politics we're talking, I mean, already talking about a DEI hire. I have no idea what that is supposed to mean other than the acronym that was used. But I do wonder from your perspective, Ameshia, I mean, this is somebody who is likely going to inherit some of the ill will, if not all, towards Biden as being a part of the ticket. This is something that Biden had to contend with in terms of his association with former President Barack Obama. Are there obvious Achilles heels that Harris has to contend with and she could distinguish herself from her running mate of yesteryear?
Absolutely. And I think, to your point, it might have been a smarter track for them to go after policy. However, I would argue that they are going to stay in a very uncomfortable lane for a lot of people in the DEI attacks, in the Black womanhood attacks, because they love to concert in racism. That is where they get their excitement from, even though it isolates many minorities across this country, as well as younger populations who are not comfortable with that language at all. I think that what we're seeing here is someone who, in Kamala Harris, knew exactly the underpinnings of being on this ticket originally, because she saw the polls. Americans largely do not like the current economic status. And the mayor was right. We stand as an exemplar to the world when it comes to bringing the economy back from the pandemic. But moms going to the grocery stores are not comparing their tickets now to what European moms have. They are looking at the cost today versus the cost 5-6 years ago. I think that she's going to have to be able to wrap around an economic message of progress and growth, but also actually speak to where people are. Lean in on the fact that folks are having a really hard time with the cost of living right now, rent increases, things like that. Bringing that to bear, having those voices also on the campaign and talking about strategies, working with communities to alleviate that pain. Those are things she's going to have to do. We're already seeing her move forward in some of the agenda items, specifically around what we see with the protests related to Israel and Gaza. She is not going to be at that joint session of Congress. Obviously, she's going to have a separate meeting with Netanyahu, but she's not going to be at that joint session of Congress.
Is that problematic for her not to attend? I mean, there are some who are going to characterize that as a boycott, and there are those who are actively saying they're not attending because they will do it as a boycott. She has been intimated in some respects that maybe it elevates her, that she's not somebody simply in a perfunctory role who is just overseeing, but instead she'll meet personally with Netanyahu, a world leader. How do you think she needs to address that point of her absence?
Well, I think it's just that. First and foremost, she said she had another engagement. But beyond that, I think that she is having this meeting with him one-on-one. If she is to be the next leader of the free world, those are the types of meetings that she's going to have to engage in. As a vice president, she did not have to do that regularly. Of course, she met with nation state leaders across the globe. But to be the person who may, in fact, be the next commander in chief, it matters that she is exemplifying that power and that strength and that positioning right now.
And that's precisely what they're going to try to attack her on if they were to focus on policy, in that being second in command is not the same thing as being first in command. Now, that's interesting because they're suggesting that somehow she was running the country because of cognitive decline of President Biden, which there's no evidence of. But how do you focus on the issues of policy when there is an appetite for so many to go against her and attack her on culture wars issues, on race and gender? There are echoes of birtherism, although albeit for different reasons, but that same philosophy behind it. How do you get the Republicans to focus on those issues and not alienate, as Ameshia's talking about, those who have no appetite for that, well, malarkey?
The campaign has to set the tone. I think that's part of the issue here is they've been awfully quiet out of the gate. And I don't think that's because they were unprepared, but I do think they're trying to get their bearings before they get the message out. I think that's part of the key is getting people on the same page. I don't think that the sort of talking points are going out to the surrogates or going out to the Hill. That needs to change. I will say this. The Trump campaign over the last 9-10 months has been the most organized and disciplined it has been. The candidate is always going to be the candidate, but even for Donald Trump, he has been trying to step away from some of these landmines. He's listening to his campaign, and I think that needs to come from the top, and we'll have to see if they can pull that off for the next 15 weeks.
I mean, also, this time is so crucial to expand the tent for both Republicans and Democrats. And listen to what Susan Rice had to say when she was addressing this ignorant claim of Harris being a DEI candidate.
That's extremely offensive and dehumanizing. And let me tell you what it means when somebody calls a person like me or anybody else a DEI hire. What that means is if you are a woman of any background, if you are a person of color, if you are an immigrant, if you are LGBTQ, if you are disabled, if you're a religious minority, if you're a veteran, and you achieved success, rose to a position of leadership, you didn't deserve it.
She expanded the tent and the notion of who you're thinking about for DEI. Is that going to be problematic for Republicans?
I think it will be problematic for Republicans long term, but more importantly, it's going to be a real tough spot in some of these battleground states. Because I do think that Republicans have been using the DEI framework, the anti-DEI framework, for quite some time now, eliminating it across multiple states and colleges and universities. We saw it be led to the forceful removal of the first black president of Harvard University. We also saw those attacks on Secretary Lloyd Austin. You name the black successful person, they've been attacked as a DEI hire, irrespective of all the work they did to get to the positions they are. I think it's really frustrating to watch, but I also feel like America has awoken around what this is. It is being used as a pseudonym for the N-word when we're talking about black people, but we're also seeing it attacks on white women as well. We just saw it with the Secret Service, the head of the Secret Service. She was described as one too. I think that there is something to be said about a push to isolate women and minority groups, and this conversation that expands the definition of DEI to also include the people that it does: veterans, disabled populations, immigrant populations. You're attacking so many people that are not heterosexual white males under one umbrella, and I don't think America's going to sail for that.
You're shifting in your seat. Why?
I think it is a difficult minefield to walk through at a time when the incentive structures on the right are geared towards some bombastic rhetoric that doesn't play to the sorts of voters that are necessary to win this election. I will say, I think at a time when President Trump is banking on making significant inroads with people that don't typically vote Republican, with diverse audiences, it absolutely has to be something they're attuned to. They need to watch their message, and I think if they can keep it to policy, that's their best opportunity.